Hello and welcome to brAVe Skills. I'm one of your co-hosts, Leon Prather, and as a reminder, the brAVe Skills podcast is the practical offshoot of the brAVe Space podcast, where on this offshoot we talk about practical leadership skills, things that relate to corporate culture, leadership, things that we honestly say just contribute to you being a good human. And some of the topics that we cover are not things that you would always find in a tech-related podcast, but these are things that we believe are soft skills that all of us need to espouse and could all benefit from taking some time to discuss. And so on this show, we share a lot of our personal experiences as well to kind of back up some of the assertions that we're making and just have an overall discussion. Now, as you know, or as you may have known, the brAVe Space and brAVe Skills podcasts are both in a season of re-release right now because of some life events that have taken place. Namely, among those is Britt being on maternity leave after the birth of her first child. And I am actually going to take a note or take a page out of Britt's book today and share a personal story or really my personal perspective on some similar things that have taken place in our lives. Britt just put out an episode, I believe she called it Finding My Way Back, and that was relating to her journey coming back from a season of being out of the office and going back into the office, having been away to be able to be with her son to be with her son on leave. I was going to quote parts of the episode, but you'll just have to go back and listen to it. But what I wanted to talk about today is the same idea, but kind of from my perspective. Now, I have had some big life events take place in the last 10 months that you may or may not know about because I don't know which of those we've actually spoken about on this show. But those life events have been both ups and downs. And they're pretty monumental life changes. I want to talk about the concept of coming back after that and sort of what I've learned and also what I would encourage others to do if they're going through or have gone through or will go through these similar things. The first of which, about 10 months ago, was the birth of my daughter, actually. My first child, our first child, my wife and I, we have been blessed with a beautiful baby girl. We love her very much. We're so thankful for her. And I was really grateful to be able to take off using a lot of accrued leave and that which my company also gave. I was able to take off for about 2 months. I think it was eight straight weeks that I did of what I called paternity leave. It wasn't all paternity leave. It was some of my own PTO. But in the process of getting ready to come back to work, I myself, as a male, still went through a lot of questioning and a lot of discomfort with the idea. And I don't mean to say that I'm mentioning that I'm a male, not because I think that that's the most important thing to understand here. I'm just commenting it out because I'm not so certain that I've ever heard a male speak about how they would feel coming back to work, especially in the like traditional setup of our culture, where more often than not, in a family with both parents, the male ends up going back to work. Not always, but that's what happened in our family. Not really because of any tradition, that's just what happened in our family. And that experience is one that I wanted to shed some light on, but also just kind of talk about it from my side. So one of the questions that came up for me was, will I still have value? That was kind of the main question. I had a lot of, I'd say, value at my job, at my place of work. I contributed to the team and had done so consistently. And then I was going to be gone for a while. And things move really fast in our world. And I did have the sort of hesitation of saying, oh my gosh, when I come back, I was glad to leave. But when I come back, will everything have changed to the point that I maybe don't have as much of a place? Has the world learned to move on without me in a way? Which is a funny thing to think because personally, I have the philosophy that it's always good to train yourself out of a job, or it's always good to know that your team can continue if you're not there, right? If an entire team had one person as its linchpin, that's actually a weak team. Because if all it takes to throw off the entire thing is for one specific person to be gone, that kind of indicates that you have some things that I would say you probably need to work on in that business unit. So it should be good that the world moved on without me, but you still have that sort of maybe it's a bit selfish or anxious or insecure thought of, man, I mean, I don't know. Everyone is such rock stars. They do such a great job. I'm going to get back, and it might be like, oh, Leon, why are you here? We don't need you anymore. They're kind of irrational thoughts, but they're those that I had in my mind. But there was also the concept of, or the question of, will I still have value at home? And this is the part that I'm not sure if I've ever heard anyone else speak about. For 8 weeks, I took off of everything in life that had nothing to do with raising my daughter. For those 8 weeks, every moment of every day, I got to be present with my daughter physically. Something I never expected to even be able to do, to be honest. And I was very blessed to be able to do that by the time we had our first child. And I did not want that to end, of course. And, that's not a boohoo cry for me. I'm just saying I love my daughter. And after that much time, you don't really want to change. You have to, but you don't really want to change that. You want to just continue to be with them all the time. And you don't want to miss milestones, all of that kind of stuff. Well, here in the home, I've always been husband, but now I'm father. And I was learning that role and getting good at that role, I would say, at least early on, whatever the metric is for saying that at that point. And my wife and I were going to need to transition to the point where for, close to 8 hours a day or so, depending on how things were going with the schedule, I might be, or longer than 8 hours a day, I would be potentially unavailable, or certainly nowhere near as available as I was when I was just with my family all day. So I wondered, will I still have value once I'm out of that routine, out of that loop? When my wife is doing more things on her own that we were doing together, and my daughter is growing and getting to know my wife as mom, of course, and I was afraid that my relationship with her as dad was going to change, and that I may not have as much value. I had the nightmare of my daughter not really running up to me. And so on and so forth. Sorry, I got really personal there, but just saying that was a thought. Another thought that came up as well was, how can I possibly split my attention? How can I possibly split my attention between my work, which I do love and I care about, and the folks that I serve in my job? They need my attention. The audience that I serve needs my attention. And they, as far as I'm concerned, you could say that I feel like they deserve to get, the best that I have. But then also, I love my daughter. I love my wife. I want to not have to split my attention that way. And I couldn't really imagine how that was going to happen, but I was just praying, just believing, I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And there was a transition. Now, here's the thing. Coming back from that was challenging and was very difficult. And in fact, I came back and immediately found out that I was getting a different job. So that question of, do I still have value? We had a conversation on my first day back of how we think we need to have you have a new job and a new manager. And in context, you pause for a second and go, holy crap, did my worst fears come true that I just didn't have value? That's not what happened. That isn't what happened. The role that I'm in is actually a much better role, and I'm actually happier in it. But there was still the jump scare for a moment of, holy crap, it actually came true. I shouldn't have thought that. Dang it. um, but I also learned quite a bit coming back, because I I myself was affected as a person while I was on my leave in various ways, which I'll get to. And those things that I was affected by then ended up affecting my work, not in a negative way, which I'll get to. The second thing that took place in the last 10 months was a down. It was a big downer. In October, a few months ago, my mom ended up in the hospital unexpectedly, and I rushed away from work to go see her. Um, Essentially, she was unresponsive. I won't go over all the details, but we were pretty positive when we got that call, and the doctors were as well, that essentially we were needing to be preparing to say goodbye to mom. Um, the prognosis was not good, and we understood what was going on. We being my older sister and I, and my wife and brother-in-law. So that was incredibly challenging and difficult, of course. And if anyone listening has ever gone through something similar to that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, I'm wanting to say I think it was away for close to 3 weeks because of the various logistics, of course, and then also bereavement. We were in the hospital with my mom for about six days or so. She passed away, I think, on the seventh day. Um, had my job gave me some bereavement time. That was great, and then also she's military, so we had a lot of logistics going on as far as burials and things like that. This was a multi-week process. Probably, I think we finished all of that in about December, and it was about the very end of October when all of this started. At some point, I was still going to have to transition back into what I'm putting rabbit ears up if you're listening to this audio only. I had to transition back into, and if you're listening, you're going to laugh, or you're not going to know why I'm laughing. But if you're watching, you will know why I just laughed. Something just happened on the screen because of my rabbit ears. Anyway, I digress. I was going to have to learn to transition back into what life looked like prior to being gone, which involved work, and it also involved other things. And I have two sides to my professional life. Here on this podcast, I speak specifically about the technological side. And going back was kind of a nightmare. And then also kind of a relief, because the relief came actually because of the distraction. The distraction. I had something productive to put my mind toward, other than the processing, the emotional processing that I really wasn't having a good time with. Anyway, I did come back, and in both cases, from the up and the down, from the birth of my daughter and from the passing of my mom, I had one similar experience, and that was the wondering about how the world would receive me coming back from these pivotal moments. When you have not necessarily gone through the same thing as another person, it can be difficult to be sympathetic or even empathetic with that person. And I think that's just real life. I don't think that's an insult to anybody. I think that's just a fact. And me knowing that fact, I had to wrestle with, what should my expectation be of others, right? Should everyone feel like they're in, a joyous mood because I just had my daughter, because I was, came back to work, and I had a new manager who actually hadn't known me during my wife's pregnancy. And so all the shared excitement, wasn't necessarily there. And my manager's great. I wasn't coming right back in and was like, hey, we can kind of recap on where we left off. We're really starting from a new place. And this sort of exuberant father that also is a little bit harebrained because he's a new dad, how would all of that translate when I got back to work? And how would that be received? Would there be empathy and sympathy for the fact that, yeah, this is our business life, but also I'm a person in it. And at some point, something from home may affect work. It's possible, right? I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen, I suppose, but it's possible. And after my mom passed, it was the same story. I emotionally was having a really hard time processing. I'm actually still processing quite a bit of that, and it's January at the time of this recording. And I probably will always be processing things about my mom's passing and her no longer being here with us. If I'm having a bad day with that, what does that mean for my job? What does that mean for my team? What does that mean for those that rely on me in a different way? Can they receive me with the grace that I would hope that I would also receive them with? These were worries. These were concerns on my part. But here's the thing. I say all of that, and I shared a lot of detail there, not nearly as much as I'm sure I could have, but I'm going to leave it there. I want to encourage anyone listening with something that's kind of come up to me in this process. And that is the concept of not bringing your personal life to work. I want to throw it out the window a little bit. And when I say that, I mean the very blanket statement of don't bring your personal life to work. I think that the idea that we as people have a switch, or should have a switch, where we completely turn off one part of our life in the middle of another part of our life is not only probably unfair, but also an unrealistic expectation for us to hold ourselves to, and also for others to hold us to. Because I am a whole person all the time, and the way that I'm affected by things may affect me at other times. It's up to me on exactly how I let that manifest. But when we say that, when we make that statement about bringing your personal life to work, I think that we leave out the fact that sometimes that personal life has affected us in a good way, not just in a bad way. So your personal life does affect you, and you're bringing your affected self to work. So if it's a good thing from your personal life, I think we would all want you to come and bring that, bring that exuberance, bring that joy, bring that whatever. But then if you're having a bit of a struggle, folks might say, don't bring that to work. And I just don't think that that's realistic. And I actually don't think that any of us really do it, though we probably say that we do. I think you do on the outside, but not necessarily on the inside. So I mentioned that in both of these cases, I learned quite a bit. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my priorities. Becoming a dad will definitely help you recognize where your priorities are in line or out of whack pretty darn quick. There are priorities that in my mind or in my life have definitely shifted. There are things that have become far less important. The most important thing in my actual personal life is my family. And I love my job, and I love my I love my career, all of that. I love the industry that I serve. I love all of this. I will take my baby over all of it. And I don't have a problem saying that. Hopefully no one else has a problem hearing it, but that is the case. But I also learned, I would actually say I learned how to prioritize better through these things, because I've learned really to not sweat the small stuff and to let certain things roll off my back, while also not allowing myself to ignore things that I maybe would have before, like whether or not I am, taking enough rest time. We talk about rest a lot, actually, on this podcast too, but I've recognized the importance of doing so more so since these particular times. I've also recognized that as a person, I have more healing to do than I thought. And I've learned more through experience here that having kind of grace for yourself to heal from any kind of wound is really, really important. And hopefully you've got folks around you that can help you do that as well and recognize it as well. But what I want to, again, this is meant to be encouraging. I'm wanting to encourage everyone to recognize that if you do go through these kind of watershed moments or some other kind of watershed moment and you end up back in the normal grind, don't be afraid of letting that thing that took place affect you in some way, because it doesn't have to be bad. Subconsciously, you're probably, hopefully, coming back to work or to your normal life. Your pre-watershed life is what I should say. It's all normal, right? Hopefully, you're coming back more empathetic toward others who have or are going through or will go through what it is that you have. You know, it's the truth that the world keeps spinning, even when it feels like your world has stopped for a moment, or if it feels like your world is spinning wildly. Life goes on. Life doesn't stop because of your moment. We don't expect it to for anyone else. We certainly can't expect that for ourselves. But even though that's the case, we don't really have to deny what it is that we've gone through. And I think we can be better people and also better leaders as a result of not denying it. So you have to exist. And the notion that you will be the same person or the same leader, I just don't think it's reasonable. Hopefully you're affected for the better, even if emotionally things don't feel better. Hopefully you've come out of that situation for the better. But even if not right away, you have to exist. So my encouragement is, so exist. And just do it not as a masked or incomplete version of you, but as the version of you that you are in that moment. I believe that we should give 100% of ourselves to the things that we find important. And 100% of yourself is the self that you are. And if that self is struggling a bit, that's the self that you're bringing to work. If that self is through the moon, through the roof, over the moon, bad at expressions, that's the self you're bringing to work. If that self is a little bit of both, none of the above, that's the self that you're bringing. So that's my encouragement, that life, while it does continue through changes, it doesn't end. And please, please, please continue to exist in it, both professionally and personally. If you have enjoyed this podcast, we hope that you will give it all the stars, as we say. And if you didn't enjoy this podcast, that's okay. You don't really have to do anything. As Britt says, we don't have to like everything we try, but we're glad that you did come. For more episodes like this one, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify, and all the places that you can find podcasts, essentially. And we'll be talking with you in the next one. Take care.